thing. It's not like, oh my God, my channel's going to get banned for saying
exactly.
A couple of years ago. That was a really risky thing to say.
Oh, I lived it.
Yeah, because, you were in that storm.
Yeah.
So the storm right now is that Kamala Harris has this massive grassroots support. That's why when she ran for president in 2019, she had to drop out before Iowa.
How many delegates did she get that year?
It'll take us the whole show to count them up. But like, come on. I mean, look, however you feel about people, there's people I despise politically.
Sure.
I cannot stand Bernie Sanders politically. I hate socialism or whatever he is. He's not exactly a socialist, but whatever he is, I hate it. But he had real grassroots support.
For real. That's why they had to steal it from him.
Yes, exactly. Tens of millions of Americans supported Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump, however you feel about him, has real grassroots support. Barack Obama, however you feel about him, had real grassroots support. You know what they all have in common? They didn't drop out before Iowa. Because nobody with real grassroots support doesn't make it to the first contest. And Kamala Harris, it's not as if she was a Bernie Sanders or say like a Ron Paul or a Dennis Kucinich. She had major donors behind her. She took much of the Clinton campaign staff. I mean, she was touted by the corporate media as like the candidate when she first announced in 2019. And still with all that, couldn't get to Iowa. So in other words, I think the whole Kamala Harris thing is fake. It's all astroturfed. I think if there was a real election today, I don't see how she could beat Donald Trump. But all of that, is
so maybe
we don't know that that's going to happen.
I don't think, no, of course that's not going to happen. But I wonder though, if the lesson is, maybe we've been taken in by this illusion that it's about people when really it's about machines, the machinery of the party system, particularly the Democratic Party. And it just kind of doesn't matter what Kamala Harris is like, what her record is, what she believes, what she'll do or not do. She has no role in any of that. She's just a stand-in for the oligarchy.
Yeah. I mean,
it does feel that way, though.
Yes. Well, we're kind of running that experiment right now to see how fake it is or how little the people actually matter. I will say, at least with Joe Biden, they proved they couldn't do it with him. Like he was too senile.
That's right.
To be able to pull that off. So the machine, just like everything, right? Just like the U.S. empire, governments in general, they're not gods. There are limits to their power. The question is like, can they pull this off? It's interesting to me.
That is a really smart point. And I'm glad that you said that because it actually makes me feel better.
Yeah, well, we still have a shot.
There are limits. They're not omnipotent.
Yes, that's right. Well, I mean, look, there's lots of examples of that, like every foreign policy decision in the last 20 plus years.
Yes.
I mean, they actually can't do everything. They think we can do a lot. I mean, we can take down nations. We can't build them. We've learned that.
That's right.
But, with Joe Biden, there was a really weird mix of things that happened. And one of them is that there is a kernel of truth, just a kernel of truth to the corporate media narrative, which is that obviously, like me and you were talking, I think at least since 2019 about Joe Biden's very obvious cognitive decline. It was very clear when he came back around after being vice president. Like if you listen to him back in 2016 when he was made the decision not to run.
Yes.
He said it was because, he wasn't over his son dying or whatever. But obviously, we know it was really because Obama pushed him out in favor of Clinton, even though it was kind of his turn. Traditionally speaking, he was the vice president. But back then, he kind of was Joe Biden.
Oh, yeah.
And then once he came back around running in 2019, it was like, whoa, this isn't Joe Biden anymore. But the kernel of truth to the media narrative is that it's also true that it got drastically worse. Like it got, whatever it was, it went from being a thing where, I mean, I remember on your Fox show in 2019, you'd be like playing these clips of him where he'd get the state wrong. He was telling these weird stories,
It was transparent.
It was very clear, but he was still a little bit like hit or miss.
Yes.
Like he'd have one speech where he kind of was okay. Then the next speech, he looks like he has dementia. It was like whatever Joe Biden showed up, and he did the debate did he do one or two debates in 2020? I think did they do two? I can't remember.
I can't recall.
But he got through them. I mean, Trump kind of talked over it. Trump made a real tactical error.
Yes.
And just dominated, whereas you want to let Joe Biden talk.
As we learned. Yes.
The muting the microphones really worked in Trump's favor in that debate. But lately, it's not like every other speech.
No.
He's bad. He can't pull off one. He can't pull off any interview.
But is he still the president? Who is the president of the United States?
Well, we don't have one. And this
How strange is that?
Well, this is what's crazy to me though, right? Is like, so if you look at, first of all, the distinction, which I think should be obvious more and more to people, is that the distinction politically that matters right now is not left versus right. It is that is just not true. It's one thing that, man, it drives me crazy amongst like Republican voters and even Republican leaders that they still want to see things in that distinction.
Yeah.
They still want to go the far left Nancy Pelosi or whatever. It's like, yeah, she's not really far left. She uses far left language, but these people, it's not, calling Kamala Harris a communist or whatever. And I know people were sending this clip.
These are people who work for JP Morgan.
Yes, they're not communists. They're for big business. And they're like, yeah, but look at this clip. She's talking about equality of outcomes. Like, she doesn't even understand what that means.
Of course.
It's not really communist. They're using leftist language.
Of course.
They're liberal. They're neoliberals
exactly.
who are for big business. So the distinction is not left or right. The distinction is like establishment versus dissident, or corrupt versus honest, or something like that. That's why Glenn Greenwald is not on the opposition team to us, and Mitch McConnell is our ally, right? It's not about that. But so one of the
that's for sure,
right? So one of the things that the establishment has, which is really something I've been marveling at lately, is they have unbelievable message discipline, something that us, the dissidents, could never dream of having. I mean, it's just unbelievable. You see some of like the compilations of the corporate media. It's just like, hey, JD Vance is weird. That's the line this week.
Tim Walz is avuncular.
Yes, everyone.
Not weird at all, though.
Well, look, my
totally not weird.
Well, my good friend Michael Malice, who you had on your Fox show, wrote the book on North Korea, and he's just really smart guy and hilarious and a great guy. But he pointed this out that when a few years ago when Joe Rogan was taking ivermectin, his doctor prescribed him ivermectin.
Is that the fish tank cleaner or the horse tranquilizer? I can't remember which one.
All of them, horse dewormer.
Dewormer.
And there's a million different things that ivermectin does, yet they all picked horse dewormer and repeated that. And then, you could look back, sharp as a tack. Joe Biden, sharp as a tack, sharp as a tack. Everyone said this in private meetings. He's sharp as a tack. People forget the shortest lived propaganda campaign ever, which was way back last month, was cheap fakes.
Yeah.
You remember for a week, you were told that there are these videos, they're kind of like deep fakes. What distinguishes them from deep fakes is that they're real videos. But but you see, Tucker, they're trying to make it look like Joe Biden is old and senile, but that's all just bullshit or whatever. So they stay on message. They very much stay on message. Whereas the MAGA movement has nothing like that. And part of that is because Donald Trump's at the top. That's right. Donald Trump doesn't stay on message. That's not how he works. He's a stream of conscious type thinker who goes on stage and doesn't even know what he's going to talk about. He figures it out while he's up there. There's something kind of endearing about that. But
more fundamentally, one movement is about the individual.
Right.
And the other is about the collective.
Absolutely.
So the collective doesn't care about your opinion.
Well, it's amazing, right? Just that even of these people who work in places that you used to work and some places you didn't work, but like people at the New York Times or the Washington Post or CNN or NBC or CBS, that like all of them, at least in their own mind, still pretend to be journalists, and yet they're somehow able to just repeat the talking point exactly verbatim as everyone else does. So anyway, my point is we don't want to be that, because we don't want to all just be mindless drones.
Right.
However, it's amazing to me that Donald Trump, none of his surrogates, no one like on the pro-Trump side seems to be able to effectively hit Kamala Harris with what is the most obvious thing to hit her with. It's the greatest scandal in American history, which is like what you just said, that we don't have a president. The president of the United States, everybody has essentially admitted, is too senile to run for president. Yet he's going to be president until January. We are in a proxy war with the biggest nuclear power in the history of the world, and we have another proxy war-ish type thing that looks to be devolving into a wider regional war in Israel, and we don't have a president. This is like the biggest scandal in the history of the republic, if we're a republic anymore. And Kamala Harris is directly implicated in this. Like, she was one of the major people lying through her teeth that Joe Biden is sharp as a tack in private meetings. And it seems like somehow the Trump campaign has not been able to effectively hit her